everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk ETC. We're going to update you on the latest ETC happenings, and I have Bob Summerwill and Yaz again with me, and they're going to help me out. So welcome, as always, to both of you.
Hello there.
Hey, Christian. Thank you for having us.
Sure. So I know we were talking just before we started recording what we were going to talk about. So you had said there was some conferences coming up that people should be aware of. So why don't we start there?
Well, yeah. So we just got back from Denver, which it's one of the largest hackathons on the planet. There were about 3,000 people there, and you don't pay to go in. You know, it's a free event based on sponsorship, and you know, lots and lots of fantastic teams building crazy and awesome things there.
Yeah, so that's not just to go and hear talks, but people literally go there to write code, to create businesses. And is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, you know, the hacks started on the Friday night. They run all the way through the Saturday, and then you got judging on the Sunday. So both Yaz and myself were judges. I was speaking as well. And then, as well as talks, you also had a bunch of exhibitors. You know, lots of layer 2 teams that I got a chance to speak to as well.
When you say layer 2, are you saying lots of people making state channel systems?
State channels, roll-ups, you know, privacy layer 2 solutions. I mean, the recurring pattern that I saw there was that you've now got to the point where blockchain has grown so much that, you know, you have orders of magnitude more people coming to the table. And many of those people, you know, with deep experience of large scale scaling and databases or you know, network tech, and people going, well, great, you know, we got attracted to, you know, to sort of the Ethereum or the blockchain story and smart contracts, and so we started building something, and then found, oh, you know, this isn't going to scale how we wanted. So we took Geth and we forked it, and it's, you know, we made some networking changes or whatever, and now it's 100 or 1,000 times faster. And now, you know, where do we go with that? So I think we're in this position where we've now got really, really competent, like, engineers coming to the table who are sort of like good research project guys. And now here's how we can, like, make this thing, you know, for real. And then the question is, how do you incorporate all of that skill and experience and knowledge in a way which is, you know, useful without compromising the goals of the project, right?
Right. Now, I had a question for you. I was wondering about from your comment. So it doesn't seem like the layer 2 guys are all rallying around one or two main open source projects. I could be wrong, but like Git took over source control management, right? And
yeah,
nobody tries to compete with it, but it doesn't seem like that's happening with layer 2. Am I correct in that?
Well, I think the reason for that is that there's many different approaches. So what you're seeing, which is just awesome to my mind, is that, you know, you've maybe got 10 or 12 different projects that are looking at alternate approaches to scaling. Mm-hmm. So that's great. You know, like, who knows what's going to work best, and also, like, the idea that you're going to have some single solution is just, you know, I think that's wrong as well. So where Bitcoin is really like all the chips are on Lightning, I think what you've got on the Ethereum side of the table is, well, no, there's like numerous different approaches. You know, you've got state channels, you've got optimistic rollups, you've got Plasma, you've just got sort of sidechain, you've got POA, you've got POS, you've got DPoS. You know, many off-chain scaling as well. You know, many approaches. And then the other thing is that probably all of these can stack up, right? They're not an either or. You can maybe combine a whole bunch of these. So a lot of these layer two groups maybe started out, right, we're a state channel solution. But then they're like, oh, optimistic rollups, maybe that's useful. Oh, and then maybe a privacy piece in there is useful as well. So many of them they're not like a one-trick pony. They're looking at a whole bunch of these different things. And then for all of these different approaches, there are multiple different companies building their own solutions as well. So there's there's this rich diversity of things going on. And then the other thing that was great is certainly in all of my conversations, and I'll shut up and let Yaz talk soon, in many of my conversations there with these L2 teams, they really got the ETC story as well. That there was this a very broad kind of agreement, I guess, of saying that the sharding F2 approach doesn't make sense to a lot of these teams as a primary means of scaling, that really scaling up as a layering approach makes an awful lot more sense to these teams, who are then looking at the EVM and going, well, look, the EVM itself could obviously use a lot of improvement, and EVM plus layer 2 scaling is like looking like the best approach to them, and that fits in marvelously with ETC. They understand, wow, ETC plus their technologies could be the best approach.
Okay. And so ETH Denver, and then any other conferences you want to mention?
Well, Yaz, do you want to talk about your Denver experience?
Yeah, hey. So I think ETH Denver was overall like a major win for ETC because Bob's talk was like very good. A lot of people attended from the Ethereum side, and they're like asking Bob a lot of good questions after, and it became like a very intimate kind of conversation about like the future of ETC, how ETC can like contribute either to like layer 2 like Bob was talking about, or on the EVM directly. And there was also like a question about stateless clients, which is like slowly getting a lot of interest around here. I think ETH Denver was amazing. There was a lot of good projects at the hackathon. A lot of people are slowly like more open to ETC. There was also this Aragon court drama, but that's like another story. And yeah, pretty good.
Now I'm a little confused about this. So they have these coding sessions, and it's not enough to just show up and code. They also have to finish their product and then enter a contest. Isn't that's quite a high expectation, right? Usually software takes a long time, and they have to all done.
Yeah, so hackathons are very high pressure, high expectation in order to deliver something. Like a lot of people who come to these hackathons, from my experience, a lot of them they're like entry-level developers they just learned like JavaScript and web development. They're touching base on Solidity and how to like deploy a smart contract. And they want to do like an interesting sort of like merge of all these kind of technology. And then you have like the expert engineers who are working for these other companies, like maybe working for MakerDAO or working for Whitelog or ChainSafe or like millions of other companies. And they're also building really cool stuff. And so the thing is, it takes 3 days. So a lot of people don't sleep while they're trying to deliver on.
Oh my goodness.
Right, yeah. Like a lot of people don't sleep during that time. And like you either trying to deliver, you're trying to finish a track, like let's say MetaMask has a bounty, $1,000, or some other company has a bounty. You try to either like you build an app, you try to fulfill as many bounties as you can if you want to, or you try to go for the overall competition where you're waiting for the judges to come to vote on you after they see your presentation and see if it's worthy of going to the next round and stuff. So there are like a lot of good projects as well that I saw that were even despite the fact that they were built like, within 3 days, it was like a lot of good projects going on and stuff. Um, One of them was called Bitcoin Earn, which is basically you deposit your Bitcoin on an app in a wallet, and then you can mint TBTC, which is like the tokenized version of Bitcoin on Ethereum as an ERC20, and allows you to do a lot of cool things with the, the token. Basically, you can run like Solidity smart contract that would reflect back on the Bitcoin being like crap.
Right.
Like so, you can manipulate Bitcoin with Solidity in a way. So Bitcoin Earn was like you deposit your BTC and then you get Bitcoin like your TBTC, the ERC20, and you can earn interest on it. Which is interesting because that way you can pull in a lot of Bitcoin developers and enthusiasts to check out DeFi for the first time, and that was like a clever project. The other one, and I think that was my second favorite, and I love it, is called Explainer, like Explainer, but Explainer, which is basically like a fun UI for basically any transaction you generate or like bytecode from Solidity that is outputted. You can paste it into Explainer, and then it color codes every like all the bytecode instruction. And when you hover over them, it tells you what the instruction is. Yeah, so like if you're really trying to mess with the assembly language level, with the opcode, trying to figure out how things move and stuff, it's like a really nice UI to like see what the instructions are and like how is that interpreted and stuff. So it's very useful. I think a lot of engineers can spend a lot of time having fun with it, and like at the same time, you learn about it. So it's a great mix of learning and like having fun at the same time. So yeah, it's a lot of expectation. I only did like a few hackathons in my lifetime. Like after I got a job, I'm like, I don't want to do any more hackathons because like, I don't like the idea of not sleeping well for like a few days just coding. Like I've done it a lot of times in university. It's not fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, something which I think has changed over the last couple of years is that all of the tooling and building blocks are so much better now. So, I mean, I think a lot of these people in hackathons, they are able to produce something, within a day or two, where maybe a couple of years a couple of years ago, you'd be screwing around, like getting things set up at the most basic level for a lot of the time. You have got a lot of sort of off the shelf tools and frameworks and building blocks now, so that you can, explore an idea which is a composition of some existing pieces a lot better than was the case, even a year ago. I think we're just seeing a lot richer set of stuff happening, around Ethereum, the protocol. And then because we've got such a high compatibility now, all of that stuff, just works for ETC or will in the very near future.
Right. Yeah, I remember years and years ago when ETH started, the tooling was really primitive. It was difficult to do hardly anything. You had to contact some of the higher ups in the ETH Foundation sometimes to get questions answered on what to do. All right. So what other news do you want to share?
Well, this week, so later today, I shall be getting on my flight over to London, and Yaz will be there as well, as will Alison, the financial controller of the co-op. So we are off to London. There's going to be an EEA meetup on the Wednesday night. There will be 2 days of EEA technical spec working group meetings that Yaz and I will both be at on Thursday, Friday. So what that's really talking about is the co-op joined the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance in November, December. And what you've got going on there is a specification effort to define what enterprise Ethereum means as a specification. So you have a number of different bits of client software which are intended for the use of the Ethereum protocol in the enterprise. So you could really see that as being a superset. As being a superset of public Ethereum, adding some additional kind of modes.
Right.
So running, as say, running as a consortium chain, having permissioning or validators and so on. And really, those kind of use cases, they're not very different from, say, the POA testnets, like Gourley and Coty. Mm-hmm. Many enterprises are basically running an Ethereum, but with a set of known validators. But essentially, it's just the same as a test net or a private network that you'd set up yourself. Not so very different. So yeah, you really have this effort that's been ongoing now since 2017 to produce, to sort of standardize the Ethereum specification effectively. And if you look at what you have on the Ethereum mainnet or the ETC mainnet or the EA, they're all related activities in the same way as the Ethereum Classic specification, the ECIPs, is mainly built using EIPs. Right. It's the same on the enterprise side. These are all just really different flavors of Ethereum with, 90 to 95% of commonality on the specification. You could really see all of these as just different deployment chains.
Yeah, I've taught when I sometimes teach introduction to blockchain classes, and I mention Hyperledger. And one of the compliments people make about Hyperledger is it's very modular. You could swap out different identity components, different bridges between private chains, and so presumably this standardization will also make it modular to better compete with Hyperledger as well.
The other thing to say again about Hyperledger is Hyperledger is a collaboration project within the Linux Foundation, which contains multiple different ledger technology projects within it. So what you're talking about there is Hyperledger Fabric specifically, but also within Hyperledger, you have Hyperledger Besu, which is the client which has been built by Pegasus, the consensus protocol engineering team, which we've funded ChainSafe to do the work to add ETC support on. So what you have with Besu is a code base which can run in all of these three buckets. And there will be more. So really what we've got with both our interaction on the EEA and on the Hyperledger sides is really recognizing that all of these are all part of, Ethereum, the technology, getting out of our Queen-specific bucket thinking. And in the same way, I think as those L2 projects, just fit just fine with ETC, it's exactly the same on the enterprise side. Really, you could look at those L2 technologies as being very analogous to everything happening in enterprise. The enterprise Ethereum chains, well, they're L2 chains as well. They're all EVM L2 chains, and whether they happen to be run, behind a firewall or in the public, it really doesn't make any technical difference whatsoever. All of these are all just different flavors of the same kind of thing.
I was wondering, what industries are you aware of that are really adopting private blockchain technology like Quorum, like EEA, pretty heavily? Are you aware?
The biggest adoption is within finance, obviously, like financial use cases are the most obvious things to do with blockchain. Okay. So you see that as DeFi on public permissionless. But you see that as, say, consortium chains in the enterprise. Well, say a set of commercial banks are doing something together to either do settlements between them or to do bonds or to model stock exchanges or insurance. Any and all of that stuff is going on, and perhaps the most leading edge on that financial side is the central bank digital currency projects, which are really, really coming to life right now. Obviously, like China's the sort of the head of that with their scary big brother horrible solution. But you see central bank digital currency projects announced in the EU. I've just got a little list of them here. So there is Eurochain in the EU. There is e-dinar in Tunisia. There's the Petro in Venezuela. That's a bit of a horrible one. There is there's one that Saudi Arabia are looking at. There's Turk coin in Turkey. There's e-krona in Sweden, and there's Paymon in Iran.
All right. So these are what's called stable coins, that they're tied to some tangible asset that keeps the price from fluctuating like standard.
Well, they're more than stable coins, actually, because they are actually issued by the central bank. Okay. So they're not some synthetic approximation of a fiat currency. They are actually fiat currency.
Okay.
Tokenized. So you don't want to do your savings in those, obviously, but they could be awesome for payments. And many of these are perhaps going to be built on these same technologies. They're going to be built using Ethereum or built using Fabric or built using Corda. And they just are, well, look, here is a chain instance that's actually just run by the central banks and commercial banks for a given company and just fits straight in as payment technology, but can use all of the same kind of underlying technologies.
Right. Would you run a stable coin on a private consortium chain, or would you need the public chain for that?
Either, whatever.
Okay. Either or, could be either one.
Yeah, I mean, they're probably going to, well, what you might have with some of these, interestingly, is another variant, which is public permissioned. So it's saying it's a public chain, but with fixed validators, so you don't have some random people rocking up and doing mining. You don't need mining. You would have the nodes run by, I don't know, banks, universities, public, whatever, trusted parties, but they would be publicly visible, so you can look at the transactions and you can verify the correctness and everything. But you don't get to be a validator. And that's exactly the same scenario as you have right now on Coty and Gourley. That's what they are.
Right. That's why you were saying it was like layer 2, because then they could egg to the public chain. They can write to the public chain and then kind of have yeah, okay, I think I understand now.
Well, and in the same way as you could see exchanges as being layer 2s right now. If you save your ETC on an exchange, it's that's not on chain. That's in their own system, which you could see as being a layer 2. That they're periodically going to be actually batching things up and flushing operations down onto the chain, but they are scaling by providing their own systems on top. And yeah, you are trust compromised in doing that, but you get all that good speedy functionality or whatever. So I think what you're going to have with central bank digital currencies is people will say, well, they're not cryptocurrencies, and that's absolutely true. They're not, but that doesn't mean they're not useful.
So, one thing I've been kind of curious about. So the Ketchak 256 proposal to change the mining algorithm. And by the way, I keep being reminded that it's pronounced Ketchak. But
ketchup, if you're Kevin.
So what's going on with that? Was there some progress on that or movement?
Yeah, so we've just started a a collaboration with Whiteblock on that. So Whiteblock are going to integrate, they're going to add Keccak 256 mining support to Bezu and command line options for using the Astor testnet and upstreaming that. So we've basically got sort of, first class Keccak mining support within that code base. The goal there then really is to look at other potential, immaturity of mining support within that code base and get that to a good place, but really to start engaging with the miners, with mining pools, with mining software producers to work out, well, if we were to do this transition, what is needed to add that support? Can we dry run through that transition? Can we look at all our assumptions? Can we basically do the process of science? We have a hypothesis, which is it would be better if we had Keccak 256 mining. It would be better if we were ASIC friendly and were the apex predator within that ecosystem. That's a hypothesis. So let's do some experiments. Let's get some facts and some data and figures and try that out to better inform decision making on that.
Right. So I like the idea of communicating with all the participants and the players, because I mean that the worst thing would be to make the switch to a different algorithm and then the mining rate temporarily drops dramatically until people figure out what to do. That would be bad.
Yeah, because I mean the other thing is that the majority of hard forks you go through, the requirement is just that the node operators will need to operate, are going to need to update their nodes. So that's kind of a simple sort of coordination task. I mean, it's hard, to do the outreach and to make sure that you get that message out to everyone, but the actual task is kind of simple for the node operators. Caveat: particular clients dying and having to say, well, look, hey, classic Geth is not going to be supported. You should be really looking to switch. That's harder. But a change of hash like this has got further impact, because it's basically saying, well, look, the mining software itself is going to have to be updated as well. There's another layer worth of coordination that needs to happen there. The mining operators, the mining pools, you've got more work to coordinate, and doing that transition is something which we've not done a transition before. So you need to work out, well, what would be the impact of that? And I mean, it is an experiment, so it's quite feasible that we could do months worth of this stuff and then come to a conclusion, well, actually, no, we shouldn't switch. And that's fine. There's some rhetoric around going, oh, look, the co-op are pushing this, they're pushing it. We're not pushing anything. We're doing some experimentation, and we have a hypothesis, and it may be falsified. That's the process of science. But we can't be afraid of trying things out. The best way to get answers is through implementation and actual facts.
Right.
That's what we're doing.
It sounds like everybody's being transparent, right? They're communicating the intentions and moving slowly. So it sounds like everybody's doing things in the wisest way. Possible change.
Yeah, I hope so. The other thing just to say on conferences is following those London ones. So we have ETH London, which is another weekend hackathon, sort of similar to Denver, but a lot smaller. And then in Paris, we have the Ethereum Community Conference, which is, one of the main sort of community events. So there's not a hackathon there. It's a straight conference, but the focus is on the community and people and projects. It is not a shilling shop. It's a gathering of developers and humans. And I'm going to be speaking there on so 2 years ago, I gave the keynote there, which was my call for an end to tribalism in Ethereum. So I'm doing a 2 years later follow up, having walked the walk on that by jumping the fence over to ETC, over to the demons of ETC. So if you want to talk about tribalism, well, there you go. So I mean, that will be very interesting, because I think, to my mind, my real fear that I had at that time was that the same maximalism that we had happening within Bitcoin was starting to appear on Ethereum. Or that was my worst fear, is like, that would be my worst kind of nightmare, would be if that kind of like rigidity of thinking and, rhetoric over facts, just chilling and horrible, like anti-science, basically, if that were to appear on Ethereum. And I think there is a little bit of that. I think that's got a bit worse, actually, in these last 2 years. It's got better in some ways, like you look at all those layer 2 technologies, or, sort of friends of Ethereum, the greater Ethereum ecosystem, and what's happening on enterprise, that's good. But you have got, shrill voices, which are really, just, well, Ethereum maximalists. Everything else is garbage. Everything but Eth is garbage.
Right. Well, and there are some kind of questionable projects like Tron. A lot of people think that's a scam, right? So there's that.
Well, I mean, it's not to say that you lose all your discernment and happy clappy, let's all be friends forever. Mm-hmm. But equally, I think that many projects are exploring different engineering trade-offs, right? And it's not, there's not a right and a wrong, and there will not be one chain to rule them all. Not everything in the world is going to end up on a single public permissionless chain, because that just doesn't make sense. There will be many chains. We've got really good interchain technology that's, in all these bridges, like the thing that Yaz was talking about there with Bitcoin bridging. We're getting to a really good place on having Bitcoin to Ethereum family bridges. And we're getting to a great place on Ethereum to Ethereum bridges as well. But yeah, like the demonization is just not really so helpful. And tell you what, talking about the Ethereum maximalism. So Yaz, why don't you talk about your court case? Because I mean, that really came in reaction to Anti-Pro-Synthesis, who is one of these shills.
Did you say court case?
Yeah,
That doesn't sound good.
It's actually a mock trial by Aragon. I don't know if you heard of Aragon. They have a token called ANT. Okay. They work on a lot of DAOs on Ethereum, and they had a new dApp called Court, Aragon Court, which is sort of like an on-chain dispute resolution system. And yeah, so to give a backstory, there was a thing called the Gitcoin CLR event, and Gitcoin is like a platform and allow you to, submit bounties for GitHub repos and, pay people in ETH or DAI in order to work on them. And Gitcoin is going to support ETC soon. So that's like a good thing. Mm-hmm. So Gitcoin CLR is basically, it's like a mathematical formula created by Vitalik called quadratic funding. Basically, I'm not going to explain the math, like people can look it up online, but if you create a grant on Gitcoin, for every, let's say, DAI somebody donates to you, the Ethereum Foundation and Consensus can match it like with a higher amount of number based on that quadratic funding formula. So you can see instances if somebody's sending you one DAI and you're matched with 7 DAIs from the Ethereum Foundation and Consensus. And the higher amount that they donate, the lesser that's being matched. So it's sort of like incentivized. Like if more people want to donate one DAI to you, you can make a better chunk of CLR matching rather than if somebody give you like a lot of money at once. So and that's up to $200,000 that's committed by the Ethereum Foundation. And yeah, so one Ethereum maximalist on Twitter who just like hates everyone who's not in Ethereum, that had been really problematic to people in E2C, and a lot of Ethereum acknowledge that he's really problematic as well, but they understand what he's doing. Yeah, so he started making a lot of money on the Gitcoin grant and CLR matching, and it really pissed off everybody in Ethereum, right? Because he's an anonymous guy, nobody knows who he is, and he's just like always shit posting and retweeting stuff about Ethereum while attacking anyone who's not in Ethereum, right? So naturally for me, I'm like, well, I don't want, like, he was making about $11,000 in CLR matching, and people, like, the community donated about $1,000 to him, and he was making about 11K in matching donate, and that's like it's like a good chunk of money, you know?
Right.
So naturally for me, I wanted to experiment. I thought I was going to get rejected, but I applied for the Gitcoin grant in order to hopefully that I could get approved in the CLR program. Knowing, like, and I know that they would know that I'm with Ethereum Classic because I know some of the team members in Gitcoin that would be behind that kind of approval, right? But I was approved, like nobody made any problems and stuff. So I wanted to double check with some of the team members. I'm like, so I'm in the CLR? They're like, yeah, I mean, technically you're in. If anyone who applied gets automatically matched within the CLR round. It's not exclusive to you, being in Ethereum and stuff. So anyway, yeah, what happened after I started going on Twitter. I got some DAI donation from people, even though everyone knew that I was with Ethereum Classic. I made 25 DAI, which is like $25 in CLR matching, just to show you how much people donate. Not a lot, right? But it's just like an experiment, and I was just trying to troll, So what happened a week after, Vitalik came up with a post recapping the whole event. And he talked about my grant because, a lot of people retweeted it. People were talking about it. Vitalik noticed. It's like, oh, wow, and he compared it to, like, if somebody would apply, if the U.S. government was doing a CLR round in America and somebody applied and got approved to get that money in order to promote Russia. So, yeah, I think he meant it with, like, in a good spirit, because I did ask him later, I'm like, did you mind that I applied and I got some money? He's like, no, I thought it was fine. But yeah, so because of that whole...
It was better than when we got compared to North Korea, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's better. It's a better comparison than North Korea when we got compared to North Korea. Yeah. Like Russia, I think is a step up, like we should be honored. But yeah, so what happened after, Christian? Because of all this like event and me applying and stuff, Aragon, they had their DApp called Aragon Court. It has nothing to do with Gitcoin, has nothing to do with anything. It's just like their own, dispute resolution system that's been deployed on Ethereum. And so for them, like the way Aragon Court works, you have to spend like 100 DAI, like $100, to become a juror in the court system, right?
Okay.
And the juror's job is to, like, you have to vote on disputes. Like, they'll give you evidence for and against. They'll talk to you about, like, this is what happened, this is what the dispute is. And as a juror, every round, it's like one block is like a couple of hours on Aragon Court, you vote. But the way you vote is not like in a real court system. You can't be impartial. You have to vote based on how do you think the outcome is going to play out. So if you think, like, in this dispute that most people are going to vote this guy guilty, you would, like, it's better for you to vote as well guilty, because then you get some of the money. You get rewarded for voting in the way that, the crowd votes, rather than voting in the way you think is correct. And the reason they say is because it avoids people, like, attacking each other, like, taking each other to court and stuff. It's more like about a quicker dispute resolution system if you can just lean in the way that you think the outcome is going to play.
Right. Kind of like proof of work, and it comes to a conclusion, consensus, anyway.
Yeah, it's in a way, yeah. It's like, you have to, like, and they want people to be incentivized to do it. And in order to get people started, before, like, actual disputes come, they did what they call mock disputes, like fake disputes, right? The mock disputes, the reason they have mock disputes is because they want people to set precedent in the court, in Aragon Court. So let's say in the future, if one case, you presented a case as a juror and you want to review similar cases, you can refer to the mock dispute in that regard and what do you call it? Use that ruling for the mock dispute as a precedent for how do you want to rule in a future dispute. Right. So what happened is the first mock dispute that Aragon Court proposed, they submitted was me. Me versus Gitcoin in a mock dispute. They played out the whole scenario for against evidence why I should be included in the Gitcoin program and evidence why I should be blacklisted because I'm with Ethereum Classic, blah 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 and stuff. And yeah, so I didn't know about this. No Gitcoiner didn't submit anything. Gitcoin and I are cool, but they submitted that. Aragon submitted that mock dispute. And I got tagged in it later on Twitter when people were like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen to Yaz is he's being tried and Aragon Court and stuff. And I was reading, I'm like, what is this? What is this thing going on, right? So yeah, I mean, after that, what happened was, first I thought it was funny because I'm like, oh, the thing that I did, my troll move is now really going viral, right? There's a mock dispute for it. But then it started getting weird when people they didn't understand they're Aragon Court trial and stuff. They're like, oh, did Gitcoin have a problem with you? That's why they submitted it and stuff. So there's an assumption of wrongdoing here, right? And then when the votes came out later, a few days later, they were all voted against me. They wanted me to be blacklisted from the even though it's a mock dispute.
Right.
So my issue came there when I was there. Was there's threefold, right? First issue I had was hey, this is going to set a bad precedent for future disputes in the system because you're assuming just because a developer, an engineer works for a different network, he's not allowed to be part of quadratic funding, the CLR program, which by design is supposed to be permissionless. So that sets a bad precedent in the court system, in my opinion.
It's zero-sum thinking, right? It's thinking that if you're supportive of ETC, that means you're an enemy of Ethereum.
Right. Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
It's so that thing that would that sets a bad precedent, right? And the other thing is the examples used, the evidence used for against, and the description of my character in the program were an unfair representation of me, or there's not enough evidence to support their claim for or against. Because, I mean, the effort that gone in Ethereum and Ethereum Classic in bridge building was, Anthony worked with Virgil Griffith, Virgil brought Anthony to EdCon 2018 back in the day. Then Anthony brought Bob and Virgil to the ETC Summit 2018. And then, I met Virgil in Sydney. That's when we first met him. And then, we had a friendship over how we can work together and stuff. So there's a lot of history in how Ethereum is part of the, how ETC is part of the Ethereum ecosystem from an open source development point of view that's not been represented in that case.
Anthony Lasardi.
Anthony Lasardi, do you want to know, Lee? Right. So
the other funny tie-in here, Yaz, is that it was actually anti-pro-synthesis's maximalism that triggered my call for enter-tribalism rant.
Right,
It was him specifically reacting to me saying, "Oh, look, Cardano, is kind of interesting how that's coming along." And he said, "How can you place Cardano in the same category as Ethereum? It's a shit coin, blah blah blah, and all this crap, right?"
Yeah.
So that T is being rewarded, literally rewarded within this system for his, really vicious, horrible, rants against other things.
Yeah.
His whole thing triggered me to have my call to enter tribalism, which ultimately has ended up with me, in my current position.
Yeah.
And then now, it's right, he can have loads of money. You having $25, you have to be blacklisted. So we're talking about building blacklisted systems within a permissionless system.
Yeah.
On top of something which was specifically a construct, specifically to have, mass participation in a permissionless way on deciding where money goes.
Yeah, totally.
It's amazing.
You have to declare a mistrial somehow.
Yeah. Okay. So like yeah, just to like continue that part with the trial and stuff. Um, so Christian, what became clear to me, and that was like that's when I started getting worried, is the SEO part. When you like, let's say you look up my name or you look up my username online, and then you see this Aragon court thing, right? And if you never heard of Aragon, you might have think maybe it's like the court system in Aragon, Spain, or whatever.
Right.
But you see that my name is there, with evidence for and against me. Even though it's a mock dispute, like for the average user who doesn't know anything about crypto, like what are they gonna think? They probably think that, I've been tried in court, found guilty of something that they probably don't understand, but they're like, oh, the assumption of wrongdoing.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. No, yes.
Right. So
Yes.
it didn't hit me right away until like a few days later when they started like the voting started happening, and that's when it hit me. So so that's when it became clear, like there's a case for defamation being made here, and I didn't want it to happen. Like I didn't want to litigate, but I had to, I talked to legal counsel about it, and like, do I have a case if they don't remove this? And they're like, absolutely, because this is like it's unheard of. Like you don't build an app called court. It's like if I built an app called police station to resolve dispute, and I'm writing, oh, here there's a citation, which is just like a smart contract, for mock citation. Like it's crazy. You can't do that, Like there's like like clear reputational damage to be made. So yeah, my legal counsel told me to like talk to Aragon, ask them to remove it, and they countered me by saying, hey, is it okay if we just put on the UI on the website that it's the mock? And I'm like, absolutely not. I need it removed from like your website stuff. So
I mean, what you have here really is you've got basically like the creation of parallel legal systems, but which don't have any basis in real world law. So I think in the same way as with the DAO, that you had some people basically sort of, code is law, you can't stop this thing, you can't sue the DAO, illegality, off we go, we're going to build an unstoppable like legal thing. Mm-hmm. It's like incredibly naive that really what you have is, if you don't have clarity on the legality of this decision-making stuff that you're doing, which is having an impact on people's money, on their reputation, on their real-world stuff, what you're actually going to have is you're going to have legal complaints in all jurisdictions. You have no clarity, that makes you wide open. So Stephen Palley, great crypto lawyer, wrote an article in 2016 called How to Sue a DAO. And this was as the DAO was being created. And he was sort of, basically saying, hey, I'm a real lawyer. You think you can't be sued? Yeah, you can. Here's how it would happen. And in the worst case, if you have no clear legal entity around, this kind of shared enterprise, then the worst case is that the thing is judged as a general partnership. And that means all participants are personally liable for any costs. As in, you hold a DAO token, perhaps you're on the hook for $100 million worth of horror, right? So, like, you can say, "Oh, this is a cute little court case thing." Well, no, it isn't. Like, it really isn't. Like, this shit is going to hurt people. If you have this on-chain, decision-making court fake thing, and it actually like makes decisions on things like blacklisting, there is a very real, chance that that's going to result in real world law cases that will succeed.
Right. So get this idea out of your head that code is law means that it's immune from effects of governments, regulations. Yeah. Now, what I see, but this brings up another thing I'm wondering. Okay, suppose somebody made a similar smart contract, and suppose everybody remained anonymous, and then they did the same thing, went after Yaz. And you see where I'm getting at? Then there's nobody that the lawyer could go after, and it might stick.
Yeah. So believe it or not, the jurors that were voting were actually anonymous. Like there's a pool, like a few users are all anonymous, so we wouldn't know who voted or anything. But we knew who owned the website, and that's what made all the difference. So from the point of view of the court, like it whether it's on the blockchain or not, it's no different than any other website that might have reputation, like information or like mock or misinformation that is like can reputationally hurt you, and you can request its removal. And if they don't, you can send the website owner a cease and desist letter, and that's where you can begin, the litigation process.
Websites is where the website is where people where you can find out people's identity. That's the weak spot.
Well, I mean, it's anywhere really. It can be any participants in this process. It could be the people who authored the code, even in the worst case. It's certainly the people who are operating the live instance. And if you have got, you've got websites or you've got exchanges involving in this, basically anyone that's you can see is connected with it, they are going to be subject to being pulled into court, and it may or may not stick, but you're not going to like the process of being dragged through all that.
Right.
For sure. And like the other thing I want to tell you, Christian, so the dispute, when you create a dispute, that's like on the smart contract level that exists.
Yes.
But the evidence for and against, and like what is like the dispute about, all that data, like it's like YAML files and like markdown text, all is stored on IPFS.
Okay.
Right. So what they did to remediate, and like they on the UI level, like my dispute, it doesn't exist anymore. They removed it. But they disconnected their IPFS server. They unpinned the documents from there, but it still exists on IPFS. So it became like an interesting question where, how much do you feel like your rights have been violated from a privacy perspective? Like GDPR might be part of this as well. If your data still exists on IPFS, and like me, like my lawyer is good and stuff. Like like. It can technically be argued that it's just like an opinion that somebody posted on IPFS. So the only problematic issue was that it's being tied to the court app. And as long as it's, disconnected from the court app, the damage is gone. There's no damage to be made, that kind of thing. So it's like an interesting first of its kind trial. The
DAO hack and all these raise these interesting thorny questions that people have to consider how to deal with.
Yeah. And Udi, like from Bitcoin, one of the Bitcoin developers, Udi, he mentioned like, there was a thread about it that Pally was talking about. And Udi, talked about like, how it's funny that people who build a DAO, their assumptions are that, if we build a DAO, we don't have to register like as a corporation anymore, like the DAO is our identity. And like, he's saying like the point of registering as a corporation is to protect yourself. It's not. It's like you don't have to do it. Like you do it because you want to protect yourself instead of doing a DAO on its own.
And I mean, I guess that's really where the core of the meaning of the words "code is law" come in. Is really, to me at least, what code is law is saying is, look, you have a specification of the contract as a smart contract, which is self-executing and self-validating, right? That to me is what code is law means. Mm-hmm. Is you are saying, look, we are making a legal agreement which is a self-executing, provably fair execution kind of scenario, right? That's what code is law means. It doesn't mean you can get away from doing things which are not legal and you can't be stopped, right? You can think that, like sure, you've maybe got a possibility of saying, well, look, I'm gonna be completely anonymous, and I'm gonna build this thing, and I'm gonna launch this thing completely outside of all jurisdiction, and you can't stop me, and off you go. You can think that if you like, but that doesn't stop you being subject to the laws of the world, and if you think that, well, you're in for a big surprise. We've got the potential of having these tools to build things that weren't possible to build before, but that doesn't make you immune to prosecution if you do something which is in violation of the law of a given country.
Right. Right.
So, if anything, what you've got with these worldwide permissionless systems is you're actually subject to all of the laws of all of the jurisdictions.
Right.
Because you've chosen not to have the protection of a given jurisdiction. When you create a legal entity, as Yaz said, it's actually to protect you. It's to protect you. Generally, what a corporation is it is limiting your liability. It's saying, me and some other people or whatever are doing a joint enterprise together, and we are, doing it in good faith or whatever. And if it all goes badly wrong, we want to limit our liability. And, the corporation will die in the fire, but we don't die in the fire. If you step outside of that, you're saying, if this thing goes wrong, I'm going down.
Right. And just to add to that, I mean, looking at the history of the Silk Road site, Russ Albright, I believe was his name. So he tried very hard to keep his anonymity. And I believe it was one early email that was what did him in. So if people think that they're going to stay anonymous, they have to be very careful, because the tiniest mistake can be used to find out who you are. So it's very difficult.
You would have to have the most amazing OPSEC to be able to do this stuff.
Right.
Like, like uber level amazing.
Right.
Because, the fact is that blockchains, they are an immutable record of transactions forever. It's like the most documented paper trail that you can imagine. Yes, you've got you're pseudonymous. But the thought that blockchains are to do with privacy is completely untrue. Public permissionless chains, there is no privacy. It's completely public information forever. Right. That's what's been exposed in this case of Yaz's is like being able to get it knocked on the head, but you kind of can't undo stuff that's out there on the chain.
Right.
And yeah, like the thought that that you can get away with the legal activities is just completely false. You see the stuff that you've got going with like Chainalysis or Blockchain Intelligence Group, or there's giant amounts of activity trawling through blockchain and de-anonymizing, doing correlation with other data sources, and it's very possible to track things, and what you have is sort of old-fashioned police work. It's all the same sort of stuff as you'd have if you've got whatever shady shell companies and suitcases of cash over the border and all of this, right? Yeah, it's possible to do that. You can be a gangster and act outside the law if you like, but it's probably don't think that you can get away with it forever,
Right. All right, so
I don't think most people are trying to do that, right? If you look at most people within blockchain, I don't think they're like looking to do any of that shady stuff.
Right.
It's really about saying, well, look, we've got some new tools, and we can build new forms of things which weren't previously possible. Great. So do that within the law.
Right. Right. I sometimes tell people, technology's amoral. It's not good or bad. Like a brick. You could build a hospital with a brick or throw it through someone's window. So, but don't think that it's good or evil. It's just
no, absolutely. They are amplifiers for our own humanity for good and bad.
Right.
I think that the efforts to sort of try and control outcomes. So, say Vlad, for example, right? Vlad is repeatedly saying about, I don't know what his thing is, but something about the right to intervene or whatever. That he somehow feels that if you don't have that right, then the blockchain is sociopathic. That to me, that is just a complete projection. It's an immutable ledger of transactions. How's that moral or not moral?
Right.
It's just a tool, and how you choose to use it could be, right, we're going to build an immutable record of all transactions and tie them into social stuff within China to build a massive Big Brother spy grid of horror. Or it could be to say, look, we're going to build a public permissionless chain that is going to allow us to control our own financial sovereignty. And it will be both of those. You can't control that. I mean, that's I think that's the biggest delusion of all, thinking that we can control the outcome of the technology that we create. We absolutely can't. But that doesn't mean that, that is a non-consideration, that suddenly, like, well, there's nothing we can do. So, let hell, rain down. Absolutely not. We still have our own duty to act ethically. But that's not tied in with the technology. The two of them are orthogonal.
All right, so why don't we end there? Always great talking to you, always food for thought. So thank you, Bob. Thank you, Yaz. And until next time, best wishes.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.